let's start with Cuba then. Let's start with this overview on Cuba.
Understand international politics today.
Thank you very much to Open President, Santi and Natalie, MFG, starting us out real strong, starting us out really, really, really strong.
It's important to analyze how warfare has changed in recent history. There are some people who claim that in the 21st century, there have been fewer wars than in the 20th century and previous centuries. However, that misunderstands how war has evolved. With the creation of nuclear weapons and other technologies, it is now more dangerous to...
What is fucking... What is...
This video is sponsored by Surfshark. More on them later. Hi, it's Friday, February 6th, 2026. You're tuned into Why America. I'm your lawyer friend, Leeja Miller, here in Minneapolis. Much of my time, attention, and coverage lately has been focused on the horrors happening all around me here in Minneapolis, and for good reason. Today, however, I'm looking to a bit of foreign policy because while the clear and prolific human rights abuses being committed by the regime in Minnesota are worthy of our attention, there are other horrors unfolding elsewhere. And frankly, it's a bit of escapism for me to be thinking about horrors somewhere not on my literal doorstep. So today we're talking about Cuba. After the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro last month, Cuba has been seen as next on Trump's to-do list of foreign aggression. As predicted, last week, Trump issued an executive order declaring that Cuba poses a national emergency in the United States. And if that sounds like wild and crazy, what do you mean the country of Cuba is a national emergency in the US? You would be right. We'll cover some of the most batshit parts of that executive order, but now Cuba faces a growing humanitarian crisis as the Venezuelan oil it depended upon has dried up, and Trump has threatened sanctions on countries like Mexico that attempt to import any oil to Cuba. Countrywide blackouts in a country that already suffered from extensive blackouts have created what the UN has deemed a potential humanitarian crisis on the island. Today we're talking about why this matters, why Trump even gives a shit about Cuba, the Marco Rubio of it all, and how this tiny island nation has managed to be a thorn in the side of the most powerful country on earth for over half a century. Thank you to my partner on today's video, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a virtual private network that keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all the information sent between Anderson show called So a fun fact about me is that I have a dual degree in political science and Latin American studies. As part of that program, I had the opportunity to visit Cuba back in 2012. Here is some rare photo evidence of me at 19 on the island. Now, Cuba is incredibly complex and controversial, both for people who live on the island, as well as for the US and other international governments, and for the millions of people who make up the Cuban diaspora around the world. The largest group of them live in Miami, Florida, and Marco Rubio is a member of that diaspora community. So a single video on Cuba is not going to properly sum up all there is to say about the country, and my perspective on the island isn't the only or the correct one. To be honest with you, I was drawn to a degree in Latin American studies as a white teen from the Midwest because in high school Spanish class, I discovered that Che Guevara was hot, and I stand by that, honestly. But my opinion of him and the Cuban Revolution and Cuba as a whole obviously is much more complex than that. But I also say that because there are a lot of armchair leftists in comment sections across the internet with Che Guevara as their profile picture who know very little about Guevara or the Cuban Revolution. So I think that is also part of the complexity of the story of Cuba, the legend of it all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When I visited Cuba 14 years ago, what I encountered was an island filled with people, many of whom felt a lot of pride for their culture, their history, and their country, but with mixed feelings about their government. I found cities filled with beautiful Spanish colonial architecture that was built when Spain colonized the island and has since fallen into disrepair due to the lack of resources. After the revolution, when the US placed a blockade on Cuba, the island turned to the Soviet Union for support and resources. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Cuba has struggled to maintain its infrastructure and economy, which is a common theme among underdeveloped countries whose resources were extracted and the wealth sent abroad as opposed to enriching the inhabitants of the island itself. Pick a formerly colonized country in the global south, and it's not hard to find the ways the country is still struggling because of its previous colonization. That's not to say the island's economic struggles can't also be blamed on the post-revolutionary government, which has dealt with its fair share of corruption for sure, but I think it's really common to see one side side, the US, say that the economic struggles are purely the fault of the communist government, and the other side, Cuba, say that the economic struggles are purely the fault of the US blockade. But the reality is more complicated than that, of course. When I visited in 2012, Havana was incredibly overpopulated, with many people.
Yes, it's very complicated. 25 Cuban politicians or cops or whatever participating in corruption because Cuba is incredibly impoverished due to the sanctions imposed upon it. Sanctions cause poverty, poverty causes corruption, but no, let's not talk about that chain reaction. Let's equalize the corruption in Cuba with the catastrophic impact that the sanctions have had on it. So, yeah, this is brilliant. This is, incredibly academic analysis here.
Shoved into old, dilapidated buildings in a city that was built to house a population half as large. I found a country that was so dependent on its tourist industry that I met a man selling used.
Why is it so dependent on its tourist industry? Because it is nothing else due to the sanctions, okay? It cannot export, it cannot import.
Books in Old Havana who had a degree in mechanical engineering.
It cannot develop its industry, it cannot do anything due to the sanctions.
But could make more money selling me a used copy of 100 Years of Solitude than he could in a week working as a mechanical engineer. We spent a few days at an all-inclusive resort, a luxury, but also part of our studies of the impact of tourism on the island and of the racialized lines where the whiter staff worked the front desk and the darker-skinned staff worked as cooks or as nightly entertainment. I met a woman who had 4 degrees but was able to earn a better living making sandwiches at the resort. And by better living, I don't mean she was living in the lap of.
Yes, and that is because of the sanctions. Because anything that gets to interact with the so-called outside world can actually generate you more capital than participating directly in the domestic economy. Okay? Of course, the only place where you can make a large amount of money is what has access to the outside world, to foreign capital coming into the country. It's the only thing that exists outside of the ecosystem of the sanctions. That's how it works. What am I watching?
Of luxury. I just mean a better living than
Now I'm fascinated. We have to watch because now I'm fascinated with this.
the 20 or so US dollars per month that continues to this day to be the average monthly salary in Cuba. $20 per month. I saw a country that invested heavily in higher education. Some of the best doctors on the planet were trained in Cuba, but failed to provide employment, leading to extensive brain drain. Highly trained people leaving the island to find work elsewhere. The Cuban diaspora, the people and their.
Yes, so the government made sure that everybody can get a fair education, but it did not manage to find job postings where that education can be implemented. I wonder why. I wonder why. Could it also be the sanctions? Oh my God. Liberals do not understand incentive structures. They inherently do not. They don't comprehend it.
Descendants who have left Cuba, especially since the revolution in the late 1950s, is as complex as the country itself. Prior to the revolution, Cuba, especially Havana, was the capitalist playground of the rich and famous from the United States. But obviously there was a massive successful revolution there for a reason. The country was run by a violent military dictatorship. Wealth inequality was rampant. People saw the rich and powerful come enjoy the wealth the country had to offer, wealth that was created on the back of extractive agricultural practices and slave labor, while the masses benefited very little from that wealth. When the revolution came, the wealthy, who were often white European immigrants to Cuba from Spain, were some of the first to flee the island, and many headed for Miami, only 90 miles away from Cuba.
No fucking class, just fucking race. Shut the fuck up, bitch. Jesus Christ, next. Oh my fucking, sorry, I would just lose my fucking mind. Fuck it. Lived out. Fucking Latin American studies. Fucking eat my ass. Oh, Lord. Sorry for playing sorry for playing that fucking fake enlightened American garbage, dude. Lived out fucking cuckolds.
In Epstein farm.
I'm holy motherfucking slop. Yeah, half of the video is her fucking white-splaining Cuban, the complexity of the Cuban Revolution to us. The complex issues which surround the Cuban struggle. Yes, incredibly complex, life-altering and even murderous sanctions by the world's largest economy, largest military force over a fucking island nation. That is incredibly complex. We must remember that sometimes police officers in Cuba take bribes, and we should equalize that in our discussion with American sanctions on the country, with American death camps, even like Guantanamo Bay, literally existing on Cuban sovereign territory. Sorry to say, I feel like her videos were always like that. Yeah, they were. They absolutely always were. She's stupid as shit. Next.
Released last.
She is stupid as shit. You know, the entire vibe of it is like, I am talking down to you, you armchair leftists, etc., etc. American brained to the fucking core.
Last week, new exchanges are constantly coming to light. And this might be the most concerning yet.
You know, extremely careful not to say something controversial. Oh no, please don't say anything positive about the evil Ofororuru government.
Which is a big statement, obviously, when it comes to the Epstein file. So it's between Epstein and the Hollywood producer Barry Josephson. It's from February 2011.
Well, Leeja Miller has some good takes, but she's still America-brained. Tucker Carlson has some good takes, but he's America-brained. There's very little difference between these two people, to us, outside of America looking in. Okay? I did not hear argument, like, Tucker Carlson, when talking about Cuba, would speak the same way she does. Would speak 100% the same way she does. I don't care if it's a liberal fucking imperialist brain or a right-wing imperialist brain. They are imperialist brains to me.
Ovdje, 2 oktobra, misao Marksa I Lenina vladaju našim kongresom. Ovom kao, srcima I dušama sviju nas. 2 oktobra I misao Marksa, Engelsa I Lenina žive I stvaraju u neustrašivoj revolucionarnoj, proletejskoj, plebejskoj ličnosti druga Tita.